Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, hello, Kathy. It's Wednesday, and we're excited about continuing this discussion we've had about anger and do not sin. It was such a great question.
It really was.
That we came on. That was two parts really. One we dealt with was does God see sin the same way? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. Because see, for him, it's a simplicity in a sense of it that, well, what is sin? Well, it's where somebody isn't following, walking with, pursuing him, and letting him do his work in us. And that's called the self, right, or the flesh, or the carnal. So we believers are having, our nature, which is a nature of default to the flesh, is that anytime we exercise that flesh, however it's manifested, it's sin. So, and that's why if you and you could do something as interesting as this, you could say, I'm attending this church, and I think it's a good idea that I join this committee. That you would think, isn't that great? People are going to like it. I'm serving God. Isn't that a good thing? Interesting enough, and this is kind of funny, that could be sin.
Yeah, even though it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because you're simply relying on your own self and your own logic rather than surrendering to God and what does he have to say about it.
Exactly. Because he said, I'm the king, and I have a path, I have a plan. Let me fulfill it. I'm the vine dresser. We've been talking for over a month now on the vine dresser is the Father, and he makes all the decisions. So he said, I'm the one that's maneuvering you to have me work, God speaking, so that I can produce fruit through you.
Right.
And I'll give you the answers on everything that you're considering, even a good idea. Should I go and do this great thing at church, or should I do this great thing that I think is worthy? Now the answer may be yes, but let God show you.
Right. And even when he shows you there's a yes in that also comes with the promise of his power to complete it.
Yes.
And that's an amazing place of freedom, even in and of itself. Sometimes when we're walking and we find ourselves weary and we're not sure how we're going to step into something, if it's something that we have chosen ourselves to step into, honestly, you can't expect there to be power there.
No.
But if it's something he has directed us to do, when you step in, the power of the Holy Spirit is going to fill to complete it, which is amazing.
And that, see, he'll produce his fruit,
yes,
which is transformation, change circumstances, expanding his kingdom, all these things that he has in mind, and we get to join him in that. Yeah. So that, and on the other side of that, this is interesting too. The assignments he gives us are also considered equally worthy, equally valuable. So that if you would look at, well, shouldn't I be involved in something with big numbers, for example? And the bigger, the better. And that's kind of how the Christian community evaluates things.
Right.
Well, God would say, my plan for you might be to just spend time with your spouse right now, because you need to rebuild that. You need to even talk about what we're talking about now. You guys are living in anger and you're sinning. You're gonna need to work through this to get to a place of joy and healthiness, and that's way more important than you going and serving on a committee at the moment. There'll be times to do that. So it's not that it's universal. It's just a matter of as he so guides it. I in a part of my path of career, Linda and I had a condo in downtown Chicago on Lakeshore Drive,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I had clients there. I was in consulting, so we would travel back and forth, do about 3 weeks in Colorado, 1 week in Chicago, and it was fun, beautiful. And I think Linda even explained, that it was a great place for her and the memories of the kids, grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, the church that we're attending periodically, once a month, um, has a problem with the pastor who commits adultery,
Mm.
and they basically ask him to stop, but they didn't tell the church why, and it was a young church,
Right.
and so it was a mess, and the elder situation was a mess, and the pastor situation was a mess, and everybody's really upset, and no, they're not telling anybody anything,
Mm-hmm.
and so he fights them, and eventually he loses that fight because of governance, because he was trying to
Right.
take the church back over and get rid of the elders,
Mm.
and because of the governance, he had to leave. So he's gone, and everybody, and by the way, lots of money walked out with him because they were supporting
Mm-hmm.
him. So the church is in deep, deep trouble. Well, we're sitting there, and they know that I'm an ordained minister and have started a church in Boulder, Colorado, and done a few other church things. And they said, "Would you please step in as senior pastor
Mm.
here and take over this?" And of course, my answer was no. Uh, I have a business, and I live in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, "Well, we've heard you say that you go ask God. Um, don't you think you should go ask God?" Okay, all right, yeah, that good point. So Linda and I go pray, and God said, "Yep, I am calling you to this, and what you're going to have to do is shrink your client base. You're going to make a
Mm.
lot less money, but I'll make it up to you later. And here's how I want you to do it. And you got to tell them you're going to be a part timer because you still
Mm.
have business, you still have Colorado, and you just lay it out to them and say this is how it's going to have to work." And of course, they said, "Okay." Well, we worked at the church was about ready to collapse financially, and we went through this series of my understanding always is God knows what He's doing. So if we
Right.
got to shrink, we got to shrink, and it doesn't matter. So but through
Mm-hmm.
the about 2 year period, got completely restored, grew, and
Mm.
we find a new full time guy. Um, so it's now my time to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so the elders and other people are coming to me and saying, it was so effective to have you do this. You need to go do this with other churches.
Mm.
And there's bigger churches that need this. And, you can do this and go do this for somebody else now because, of what happened. And that's the moment that Linda and I said, well, thank you for inviting me to that, but I think I'll check in with God.
Right.
Um, and so we go to God and say, what would you have me do now? And He said, yeah, you're done. Go back home to
Mm-hmm.
Colorado and disciple your kids, grandkids, and wife. And
Mm.
that's what I want you to do. Um,
Right.
and it was like, well, yeah, but that's not 1,200 people. That's not, that's not big. That's not. He said, my assignment is my
Mm-hmm.
path for you
Right.
at the moment, and this is what's critical for you and your family, and that's
Right.
as valuable as an assignment as what
Mm-hmm.
you just did for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's really an important thing as we look at the basis of sin,
Mm-hmm.
that it's anything that we operate in the flesh with
Right.
and don't go
It's
to God.
so easy to fall there, really, because, well, we have a sin nature, I know.
Yeah,
But even aside from that, culture will time and time again reiterate the theme. Joked with my ladies again this morning, even about, that we are strong and capable women.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
strong and capable women, so we can do this. And so we had a great conversation about how that, well, there is truth that we are strong and capable women. That does not trump in any way, shape, or form what God is calling us to do, and the fact that we need His power and His guidance. In fact, when we hang on to that mantra and push through, most of the time we're making decisions that we're stepping in sin.
right.
that if we don't come under him and surrender at every step, then that strong and capable woman is actually doing her own thing and acting in the flesh
That's
and
right.
not walking in what God has for us to do, which is his abundance.
Yep, yep. So that as we then go to this next question, which we've been answering in the last 2 sessions, is, well, how do you be angry and don't sin? Okay, well, keep understanding that be angry and do not sin means anger is a normal part of our life. It's and anger itself, see, isn't sin. Because things are going to happen. We're going to get frustrated. People are going to hurt us. People are going to oppose us. People aren't going to do what they said they're going to do. And you have a right and a normal response of, well, they've just crossed my line of justice and I'm angry. God said, yeah, that's normal. He said, now the key is in all the whole process we've been talking about, don't go to the flesh. If you go to the flesh, you will both be angry and you'll sin.
Right.
And the question is, how do we stop that? Well, how do we prevent that? Well, we've read some verses and talked through them. And the first, as you look at this issue of anger, the first thing that God does is with you. And this is interesting because, well, wait a second. They're the ones that made me angry. They're the ones that did the wrong thing. I didn't do that. He says, yeah, I know, but I'm the one that cares about your life and freedom for you. So he says, first of all, make sure you stay in peace. Make sure you stay in relationship with me and go through this issue of forgiveness, able to talk with respect and honor. Don't carry the revenge factor, to go any further, and be willing to let me guide you, including, and as you get angry at things. I think I described the one about the situation at the restaurant. See, a lot of them, God's answer is, yeah, okay,
let it go.
You have a right to be angry, but it's not that significant. Let it go. Do not act on this at all. And don't let it ruin your afternoon.
Right.
Because it's not that important, because that's his instruction. This one doesn't matter this much. So don't take it any further. Just, yeah, you're angry. That's okay. Release it. And then don't think about it anymore. Okay. So that's an instruction. Then we talked about what happens when we have the opportunity to go to this other party that hurt us, particularly when we're talking about relationships. And he said, well, remember, you got to have forgiveness in your heart on the same basis you've been forgiven. You can talk with respect and honor, and then you invite them. Would you be willing to sit down and talk this through? Right. If they are, and they have a heart to follow God and a heart to understand the truth, you'll get it resolved. They'll say, oh, gee, I see this now. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. How about if we do it this way going forward? And you got it resolved. The second one is you invited somebody to that, and they said, yeah, sure. But when you get into it, all they do is reattack you. They defend themselves. They rationalize. They go into a system.
So even though they said they had a heart to resolve, they weren't really coming with a true heart to resolve. They were coming with a heart to defend and to prove their point.
Right. And again, think of the reason for that, that people stay in that mode. What's the reason that somebody's asking me to consider something I've done, and all I do is prove them that I didn't do it, and I had a right to do it. And actually, what you did is what stimulated it, and the burden is back on you. Okay, why is that? Well, that's out of pride.
Right, absolutely.
And it's immediate self-centeredness.
And selfishness, staying in, it's all about me.
Yeah, it's all about me, and I can't fathom that I did anything wrong, so I'm not going to deal with that. And I'm going to prove, I'm going to attack you and push the thing back on you. Well, you didn't get anywhere with that because remember, you've got to process the truth. So that's the moment that God would say, okay, you don't need to be reconciled with this person. Let it go. You've done what you've been asked to do. Be at peace as far as is concerning you. They're not willing to go any further. And then he says, remember, get out of the way. And this is the same thing for somebody that would say, no, I don't want to. they're in the same boat. That get out of the way. Leave room for God's wrath. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I'm going to bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. It's absolute. Yeah. And all we do is live in freedom. Don't let it bother us. And then we actually get to a point where we can pray that they would repent, which is the remedy for the curse. And because we start to understand something that, well, their life's going to be miserable. Only because they don't have a heart to follow God. Boy, I really wish they would. Why? Well, that's God's heart. That's always God's heart. Is, well, why don't you come and let me show you the way and lead you to freedom and covenant living. Okay, well, this other one that we need to talk about, which is tricky, is people can say, I understand about not being reconciled with somebody that I don't have to spend any time on. That I think I can do that. A lot of people are burdened by that, but they say, okay, I think I can do that. Well, what about when it's family?
Right. And there's no escaping it.
Mom, dad, siblings, children, friends of the cousins, friends of the family, or other people that you're on a committee with at church.
Work relationships.
Work relationships. I can't get out of that. I can't stop seeing them. Right. Because they're going to be around, and we are going to have gatherings together. And so what do I do in that scenario? Because now they're not willing to process. They're going to keep hurting you with their manipulation and the crazy stuff that goes on. And our tendency is, and this, I hear this a lot with people who are having this situation, they pray, God, change them. And maybe next time they'll be different, and they'll have a heart to be, reasonable and healthy. And I'll hope that it happens next time. And I'm praying that God changes them. And that's where, if you have a heart to follow God, the one thing he's always going to do is lead you into the truth. And he's going to let you know, well, I know something about them. They don't have a heart to do that. They're not willing to follow me. I can't force them to, just like I don't force you to process anger without sin. I can't force you to do that. It's you have a heart to do that. So now you got what I call a sticky situation. It's difficult. So now it's required is two things. One are healthy boundaries, and then wisdom. Right. So the healthy boundaries is where you understand that in certain relationships and certain frequency of those relationships, or how intimate you get with those relationships, it doesn't work because this other party is just constantly going to come after me and do things that are going to hurt me. And God says, well, I don't want you to stay in that situation. Right. I want you to understand that you can't leave that situation, but I don't want you to stay in that situation where you're constantly being hurt, because I care about you and your freedom. And even in these sticky situations, I can provide freedom for you, one of which is a healthy boundary. And a healthy boundary could be that you decide. This happened with my mom, where it was unhealthy, and God had told me to go to forgiveness. And interesting enough, I said to God, well, should I make an attempt to talk through things with her? And God said, no. It's not a good idea because you even bringing that up is going to set your relationship even further back. Right. So don't even bother. She ain't going to respond. She doesn't have a heart to respond. Okay. What do I do? It was set up healthy boundaries. So instead of getting trapped at these holiday situations where there'd always be harshness and attack and hurting me and the kids and my wife, we just said, well, what's a healthy boundary? Well, for us, it was go have a holiday with her 2 or 3 weeks before that holiday. And we could do a weekend, and we would get there usually Thursday night or Friday morning, and we could stay. We always felt that we could stay anywhere for 2 nights and 3 days, and we'll do it differently, so that is she going to continue an attempt to hurt us? Yes. So I'm going into it with my eyes wide open. That's going to happen, but we're not going to get involved in we're not going to let it ruin our holiday. So that's a healthy boundary. We're going to come and we're going to just be 2 nights, 3 days. And then what we did is we said, God, give me the fortitude, the strength to be able to let those things bounce off me, and not me engage in them any longer. Yes. Do they hurt? Yes. Are they right? No. Do I have a right to be angry? Yes. But God said, I can strengthen you.
Right.
So that it doesn't impact your heart anymore, and you release your anger, which then, because it's happening, and this is really amazing thing of God, is I prevent it from making you angry. Now, not because they didn't do it, they did it, but it's because I understand something about it, and I didn't let it bother me anymore. So we would go and she would try, and I didn't engage, and it didn't let it bother me. And Linda and I would go home after 3 days, 2 nights, and it was like, hey, hallelujah, it worked out fine. She didn't change any, but we did. See, we did.
Right.
Because God said, here's what I'm going to do for you in this healthy boundary. And by the way, if they say, well, you got to come Christmas Day, just tell them no. How about we do it this way? And that's what we did. Then we called her once a month, and we would be with her, periodically. But we had set up this healthy boundary, knowing how they function. That this is what could be healthy for you, and then I'll strengthen you so that you get proper perspective, and you flip it so that what they do actually doesn't make you angry anymore. And then the truth is, this is what happened. She tried. Well, I didn't engage with it. So after 2 or 3 years, interesting enough, she just stopped trying. It actually got semi-decent. It was pleasant because she wasn't playing those games anymore because there wasn't any effect of those. And so she actually changed a little bit. Now, she never talked about it. And our relationship was what I call shallow, because I could never talk to her about the deep stuff of, hey, by the way, this is what you've done to hurt us. Could never get there. But we could have a decent relationship. And the boundaries, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I think is important to point out in the midst of what you're talking about too is I think there's a lot of buzz on boundaries, setting proper boundaries, but you didn't just decide these are my boundaries. You and Linda prayed about that, and God set the boundaries.
Yes.
And even at times, those boundaries could be fluid. It could be, we're coming up in a holiday. Is this still the boundary? Is this still what you're saying is the healthy thing to do? Because he knows if her heart has changed. And so continuing, as you have set boundaries, continuing to check in with him, because again, he sees what's going on both sides of it. He knows where the safe place is, how to safely interact. So it's not just random boundaries that you've decided looked good because you read them in a book.
Right.
But they are ones that God placed on your heart specific to your situation.
Right. And that leads to the second issue, and that's wisdom. That God knows the answer. He said, I will guide you into how to have a relationship at a level that's healthy for you with these people that have made you angry, that are hurting you, but you can't just walk away from them. So you're going to need wisdom and understanding, and let me give that to you. And then I'll guide you into it, because God's heart, is I have a heart for all my children to be healthy and to have freedom. So I know you're in this situation, God speaking. If you'll allow me, I'll get you to freedom.
Right.
And I have the answer for that. And of course, you have to be willing to go to forgiveness. You have to have honor and respect. You have to have a heart to be at peace as far as it concerns you. But when it gets tricky, I'm going to have to guide you. I'm going to have to give you wisdom about boundary setting, or how do you do this, or what do you do when you're together? What do you do when they play these games with you?
Right.
And you got to understand that. So this is where, as we've talked about, the difference between abiding and Bible study. So we could take that same question,
right,
and say, how do you be angry and do not sin? And we could say, okay, here's the verses. Study those verses, and now you perform to those verses.
right.
And the difference of abiding is, I'm going to the truth, because he says, I have given you some very amazing truth about this whole issue. And it's what I've written in my word, and you need to go abide in those. Okay. So anybody that's listened to this broadcast over the last 3 days, and this issue of being angry and sinning is a big deal. And we would encourage you to go to the verses that we've talked through with you, and start to process it. Now, here's the difference. Don't read it as law, because this is what we shared out of 2 Corinthians 3, verses 4 to 6. If you read the Bible as law, it'll actually kill you. And you'll be actually worse in being able to fulfill the going to sin part, because you'll be doing it in the flesh, because it's in your mind. I have to, I'd better. On
your own strength with no power.
With no power. And God says, if you abide with me, see, I'll take these truths. And anybody that I disciple and work with, and they this is a typical question, by the way. I would lead them to these verses, but what I would do is say, now you start processing with God the application of this to your situation, to you, how you're reacting, what you're doing, the people that are making you angry, the situations that are making you angry, because it's not a law. It's life. And God says, I'll give you the life, but now you go spend time with me, and you listen to what I'm going to do, which I like what happened with me when we set up that healthy boundary was, it wasn't even just the boundary. It was, God, you need to put those life into my heart so that I don't react anymore.
Yeah.
And that took prayer, and that took abiding, and that took understanding and practice. Yeah. So the first time we did it, it was fair, and it got better as time went on. Go ahead.
I've had some similar situations in life, with everybody has, I think, with different people in your lives. But one of the things, to your point that you're talking about now, that God showed me that made a big difference is he started having me literally pray to have a heart to see them for who they are, not how they are.
Right.
Because I needed to see the other person through his eyes before I could even consider a healthy interaction with them. And it wasn't that I was doing something unhealthy to them, but the way I would respond to what was being done to me.
Right.
And that sort of thing. And so I was like, I really, God, give me a heart to see them for who they are, not how they are.
Right.
And really, he had to work that forgiveness. It's really working forgiveness, and then giving you eyes to see the person as he created them to be, and to begin to call out the beauty in the creation that may or may not be there yet, but to believe it for them and to pray into it.
Right. And remember, that doesn't translate, as you see the way God sees it. It doesn't translate to, I guess I should just let them keep hurting me. See, that's not what he says. He actually says the opposite. He said, don't you take vengeance, get out of the way. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because of this aspect of free nature and free will.
Right.
Is that God says, I don't force them to get this resolved on their side. They're going to have a heart like you have a heart, to start to see things differently and to get freedom. Yeah. So as you see that, you don't regard people. It actually says this in 2 Corinthians 5, 15 to 20. It talks about being ambassadors. And it says, don't look at people anymore in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it from how God sees it,
Yeah.
and understand that. And so that's the heart. And then, we've talked about, and you actually made this statement, I think it was yesterday, that as we're practicing this, there's situations where I'm not really good at this, being respectful. And so, interesting enough, the scriptures gives us a really simple truth about this. As he says, I know you're going to have to learn this.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, when you're angry and you know that you're angry and you aren't going to forgiveness and you can't deal with respect and honor, he said, there's a little something I need you to do. So if you would read Psalm 4, verses 4 to 5. This is one of those fantastic verses that is a pay by the way. And we all have to use this and practice it.
Great. Okay. Psalms 4, verses 4 and 5.
Yep.
Be angry and do not sin. Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord.
Yep. So he's describing the same comment that was made in Ephesians: be angry and do not sin. And he says, now, when you're remember, sin is you're going to the flesh. And I'm going to get back, and I can't deal with respect and honor, and I can't get there. It's difficult for me to even think through this. God says, okay, I know that. When that happens, separate and go to your bedroom. And he says, get your heart resettled with me, to where you are trusting that I'll guide you through this, and that I will give you the power to be honorable and respectful, because you'll go to forgiveness, and your heart will be right with me. So he said, and this is the way I describe it, is when the argument starts to get heated, and you've gone from talking truth to attack. And you're just, it can get to screaming. It even, can get to physical abuse. But it can be, really harsh stuff going on. And all you're doing then is you're just so mad that you're trying to hurt the other party. And you usually hurt it with words. You always, you never, you this, you that. And it's difficult to manage. And so God says, when that starts to happen, and the way I describe it is, when you sense that emotional volcano is going to go, because you can't stop it, then you say, you know what? The healthiest thing for us to do right now is let's separate. And you go somewhere else, and I'll go somewhere else, and let us get our hearts right with God, and then we'll come back together when our hearts are right with God. And what Linda and I, particularly when we were learning this, what we did is we suggested that either one of us could make that statement. You know what? This isn't going to go in a healthy way, because you know where it's going.
You can tell.
You can tell. This isn't going to go in a healthy way. So, hey, Rich, why don't we separate? And let's go get our hearts right with God, and then we'll come back and deal with it. When she first did that, because I'm a guy that, let's get this settled. It was no, let's stay here and get this worked out, right now, But she said, wait a second, I thought we agreed to this, that either one of us could call it and we would honor that. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, I'll honor that. And so you go away, and usually at first you're just worked up, and you're building your argument as to why they did what they did, and I'm mad about what they did, and they need to change, and they need to do something,
and coming up with your perfect response.
my great plan, and God had to get me to a point of, no, first of all, this is about your heart. This is what we've described. Is in order not to go to sin, my heart has to be right with God.
Right.
Okay. Do I have forgiveness toward Linda on the same basis that God forgave me? Which is his nature. And then secondly is, can I now, with calmness, go to honor and respect to talk about the stuff that went on?
Mm-hmm.
And so what Linda and I do, have done, we don't have to do this very often now, but we would go back and say, are we okay to talk?
Right.
And and there'd be times where the answer was not really. I'm still worked up. She would say, I'm still worked up. Or I could say, I'm still worked up. Okay. Well, then separate some more and come back, And,
right.
And then, by the way, it says in Ephesians there, it says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Now, when I first read that, I used to take it literally, which I interpreted meant, get this resolved tonight. And Linda and I would be up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, arguing, debating, and there'd be times where I'd be arguing and she's sleeping. She just fell asleep, because it got too long, and as I dug into that more, God said, yeah, you got it all backwards. I just said that before you go to bed, get to a point where you and your other party, your spouse, your kids, your relative, whatever, that you've come to a place to say, okay, we got an issue, but I'm good with you. I could be in the same room with you right now, and I could go to bed with you. I could, we could talk, but my wrath is gone. See, it's not anger that I still have anger, but my wrath is gone to where I'm walking in the Spirit, and I'm able to talk with honor and respect to that person. So he said that's what you need to work on today before you go to bed. It might take days to get this worked out as you process it together, so that don't ever let your emotion basically captivate you to the point where you can no longer talk with honor and respect, and you're hard-hearted because you're trying to prove your point.
Right.
And he said, if you learn this, you'll be able to be angry and do not sin.
So what about the person who's sitting here right now listening and saying, that's great, but if I follow this verse, I'm going to go be still, I'm going to go get my heart right with God and step back in. My spouse is not remotely in that place, and that's not how they're going to respond. And in fact, when I walk away from it, that's going to make it worse.
Yeah.
So what would you, because I know I have talked to many ladies that this is the way the communication goes, and their heart is to do this, but the reality is much different. So
right.
what do you tell them?
Well, two things. One is that make an effort to teach your spouse how healthy this would be, and that you would like to practice this. Because you can use it out of simplicity of the way we're doing it never winds up
not working.
It doesn't work. It doesn't wind up in a good place. Why don't we try something different? And then see if we can do that so that we can practice dealing with the issues in a respectful way and talk through it. And what I'll do, is I'll say to this person, what you need to do is say, I'm gonna be able to do this with respect. Could we revisit this in 30 minutes or an hour? And then let's start a new way of doing it. And that would be, you go ahead and share. Now, by the way, they might have hurt me, but let you go ahead and share what you think and feel about this issue, and I'll just listen. Okay, now at that moment, if they say, okay, let's try that, what happens is that you have taken the energy out of it, because you're not engaging back. See. And you're going to listen. And by the way, it could be absurd stuff.
Right.
They can say absurd stuff. And it's like, okay, what I heard you say was this, this, and this. Did I get it right? Did I get it all? And you're calming, and you are calming it down. And they start to see that, oh, this is actually better. Now, they haven't necessarily had their heart changed. And they're not going to God. But they're realizing that this is a better process. And why would you not? Okay, so that's number one. Make an effort to teach them this. And by the way, you can't teach them with force.
Right.
So, well, the Bible says, and you got to, and I'm going to, and now you've made law, and you've lost the whole essence of it. And by the way, you are in the flesh yourself, which is interesting, because you now are applying judgment and saying, I want you to do what I want to do, which, by the way, I'm saying is biblical. And so we need to do this. Well, it's by imitation. Would you have hey, how about if we try this? Okay, let's say that they try. And a lot of times it works really well. And then they start to have a different viewpoint toward things, and they work at it better. The other issue is, no, I'm not doing that.
Right. I'm
right and you're wrong. And if you want to agree that I'm right, fine. If you don't, then we'll just keep fighting. And I'm not willing to talk with honor and respect, and I'm not willing to go, quote, get my heart right with God. I don't do that. Okay. At that point, I would say, and this is where God's got to give you wisdom, but you would then say, this isn't acceptable to me. So I understand that your position. So would you be willing to go to counseling with me and have a counselor help us set up what I call rules of engagement, because how we're doing this, it just doesn't work. Right. It's not healthy, and I personally don't want to put up with this anymore because it's not right, and it's not healthy for me, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. So how about if we go to counseling? And now the counselor, a good counselor, isn't going to solve your problem. What they're going to do is give you a framework to be able to, hey, why don't you just talk about these things when you come see me? And when you do, have these rules of engagement of here's how you talk, and here's what you do, and here's what you don't do. Are you willing to commit to that? Yes. And let's go get a third party to help us. And you're not using the Bible at this point. You're not hammering them with, well, yeah, God says, because that makes them matter.
Right. Yet in your own time with God, you are allowing God to work your heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's always about you.
Yeah.
And that, let me see if I can give it a go. If not, maybe we can get a counselor that would just give us the way of conversing together that would be healthier than what we're doing. How about if we just go learn that? Right. And I'm not, and let's go to a neutral counselor. I'm not saying that I'm doing this to prove you wrong or differently. I just need a process that's going to be healthy for us. So would you be willing to do that? And a lot of times, okay, let's give that a go.
Right.
There'll be situations where people are so self-centered that they basically say, I don't care. I'm doing nothing. You either acquiesce to me, and I'm going to keep hurting you, and I'm going to keep being disrespectful to you, and I don't care. Okay. That's the time that you would have to go to God and say to him, okay, now that this is true, where do I go with this? And see, he might encourage you to, well, actually, you need to go ahead and separate. Now, I'm not talking about divorce. I'm just saying that you need to actually separate and say, you know what, this life that we have and the way that you're responding to this just isn't healthy. So I think the best thing for us to do is I'm going to go get a different place, or you get a different place, but let's operate independently of each other, and then maybe we'll have time to come back together, which I would like to do. And God may lead you to that point, that it's not a matter of acceptance. Because when you say, I guess I'll just put up with it, well, that statement is in the flesh, because you didn't keep going and say, okay, Father, I understand how difficult this is. What do I do now? What do you want? What do you want me to do now? And then let God guide you and lead you. And again, there's no universal answers to this. This is what the abiding is all about, is any situation you got, and I've seen this 100% of the time, including these very difficult, sticky situations that you're talking about. If somebody has a heart to go to God, God gets them resolved. Now, and I'm not talking about that they get resolved with the husband changes and everything's hunky dory. It can go the opposite direction. But because of that strength, what happens is that a lot of times the husband says, "Okay, fine, let's separate. And by the way, you know what? I think I'd like to divorce you." Okay. The Bible says if they want to, if they seek a divorce, let them go.
Right.
Your heart is no. I don't want a divorce. I want to stay married. I want to work this through. But if they say, now you're not the one bringing a divorce.
Right.
You might bring separation, but they would say, you know what, I want a divorce. And you got to trust God's resolution to that. If that's because that person is never going to soften. And see, our life with God is, I don't want you to be miserable. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be joyful. It may be difficult, what you're going to go through, right. But if you follow me, I'll get you to that place. And again, there's no universal you should or shouldn't. It's just a matter of, okay, here's where I'm at. Father, would you, guide me and lead me? And by the way, this is the value of the body. So that if you're in a small group, which I know you have, and Linda and I have, that you assist each other. So that it's not independent. I got to figure this all out myself. Is you bring it to the group, right. And say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what I believe God is saying. Could you help process that with me, so that the body functions as the body, right. To intercede, give you thoughts. And by the way,
and even to share other scriptures and truths that they've learned that may shed additional light that you haven't seen yet.
Right. And the goal there, it says, bring your advisors in. It's not to get their opinion,
right?
Because again, and particularly in this situation, where your husband is really, let's use the word awful. Well, if a woman is in a woman's Bible study or a women's small group, you can get all those women saying, you gotta divorce this guy. You gotta end it. That's it. He blah, 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 blah. Well, you haven't had somebody around you that says, well, why don't we go to God together and let me right. confirm what God is saying, and he will. If you ask for wisdom, he'll give it to you. So I'll do that with you. I'm not going to tell you right. what you should do, because I have limited viewpoint. I don't want to give you my advice in the flesh. Right. Rather, let's go to God. Knowing, and this is what I know, God will answer this question.
Right.
You will get resolution. And that's what we're trying to say here about being angry and do not sin. It's, first of all, I got to get my heart right and don't go to the flesh. Now, all these sticky situations of what to do next, God says, let me guide you. I will resolve it. And see, my experience and my truth and understanding of what God does is he absolutely will do it. It'll be solved, resolved. Right. And you'll have the covenant life. And he didn't say to you, well, you're just unlucky. And you're going to be in this awful situation the rest of your life. And I've never experienced that. God has always resolved everything. And God brings resolution so that you now have freedom. So it's been a great great discussion.
Yeah. Interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, and as we've maybe raised up again questions that you might have about your situation, it can be personal. Hey, by the way, I've got this scenario going on. I heard kind of stuff you said, but I'm not sure what to do with it. Send it in on the YouTube. You can put it in the comments section, or on the podcast, you can email us at questions@afjministry.com, questions@afjministry.com. And we'd be happy to, just like we got this great question, which kind of took us, as we've talked about abiding in faith, to, okay, well, here's a question that we got to get to that point of abiding in faith. And that right. is, I believe that I believe that I believe what God has now shown me, and he will fulfill it. And I believe it. And the time that we have to do is spend the time abiding, not just on theology, but on the depth of the personal application of that to the situations that you're involved with, because that's what he will resolve.
Yeah, and something I just want to add to this, the last few sessions, that's talking about anger. It's been actually kind of heavy, deep sessions.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind everybody that even in those places there is joy in abiding.
Yeah.
You've heard Rich and I talk so many times about in the corrections and in the wisdom and all of it, even in these kind of sticky situations where there is a lot of wisdom to be sought and a lot of healing that God has to do, it is truly joy.
Right.
And so be filled with hope. This is not a place that's, I got to go into this. It's, this is a place God wants to bring me freedom. And so you can be anticipatory of the healing, anticipatory of the hope, knowing he's going to show up in the midst of it. And that should be something exciting to cling to when you're sitting in some of these situations that are hurtful right now.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Well, tomorrow we're going to have a guest, Mike Sherrill, who's the head CEO of an organization called C12. It's a business persons ministry that are executives that are responsible for companies and employees. And Mike's whole ministry is to serve that group. And we've been involved together in abiding and learning that. So Mike's going to share with us his story, as well as his experience with abiding, which has meant a big difference in his life. So.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Dan's a member of C12 also, so this will be neat to hear from Mike firsthand.
Fun. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow on Thursday with Mike.
All right, have a great day.
Okay, thank you. See you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.